good day, and thank you for checking out the Sportsline podcast here on the CHCH multimedia platform. I'm Bubba O'Neill. Well, this always is a landing spot in the 905 that puts teams, athletes, executives, and broadcasters in the forefront, as we love to reveal stories about those individuals. We also love chatting about storylines in sports that you are talking about. Let's get down to business with one of our favorites. He has more than 3 decades, maybe even 4. We'll have to ask him about it, following and writing sports from a pro and amateur level. From the Hamilton Spectator, Scott Radley. Is it 3 or 4?
3. Just 3. I'm not that old.
Well, I know, but you know what? Like the Vince Carter thing, you kind of put it over 4 decades.
Well, if you're going to do that, so I started full time in 1989. So yeah, So okay, into 4. Yeah, it's getting there.
You're looking good for your age.
Yeah, that's right. No one knows that I'm 92.
Hey, you've been obviously working real hard, doing all kinds of things, but you're coming off a really what I would call a very interesting trip for what you just recently did.
Oh yeah, I had a few days off, and my wife and I just decided to head down to Kentucky, part of the country never been. Beautiful. I mean, doing the Bourbon Trail and going to Churchill Downs, and there's a lot of stuff. Muhammad Ali Center, which amazingly, unfortunately, the 3 days we were there were the 3 days of the week it was closed.
What?
Yeah.
Really?
So, but went to his childhood home, which is about the size of this couch, and is for sale. You want to invest in something? Muhammad Ali's childhood home is for sale right now.
Yeah, and it's just like middle class.
Oh, not middle class.
Oh, okay.
Like wartime. When I say the size of this couch, like I'm only a little bit exaggerating. Okay. It is a really tiny home, and I think it's up for like 1.6 million US. It's entirely about the history.
Right.
You couldn't live there. It's a museum. You probably aren't going to make a lot of money, but maybe a guy like you with your salary, maybe you want to own a piece of sports history.
Salary. Doing so well. I would retire right now if I could, and I will buy that house one day.
Eventually. It's worth going to, though.
Oh, good. Congratulations. Good to see you. Now we've got to put you back to work now.
Yeah. That was fun.
All kinds of stuff going on, Scott. And when I was looking at our topics, as we've normally done, you brought you in for the Sportsline Square-Off on so many occasions, and there's so much going on. So we'll spread it all out.
It's that time of year.
It is that time of the year. We get it in April as well, too. But I think this right now is where everything is underway or ending or coming to an end or starting. So a lot of fun. Let's talk about what's coming to a conclusion. A couple of games remaining. The Hamilton Tiger Cats 2024 season, 6-10 right now, officially eliminated from the postseason. And for the first time since 2017, they will not make the playoffs. Boy, I really struggle to say this word, but I think it's really the only way I have to ask it. I can ask it, sorry. Is this season been a failure?
I don't know why you're having a hard time using that word. That's the only word. This is a 9-team league. You have got solid ownership. You have got good crowds. You've got lots of support. You've got presumably a big front office. 9 teams. It's harder to miss the playoffs than to make the playoffs in this league. So yeah, to miss the playoffs, forget even missing the playoffs. I wrote about this week. This year, when they got eliminated, it makes 25 years since the Ticats have won a Grey Cup. It's a 9-team league. That's ludicrous. That's more than ludicrous. That's mathematically almost impossible. And so then on the 25th anniversary, you don't even get a chance because you missed the playoffs. Yes, it's a failure. It's a failure by every possible definition of the word.
I struggle because I feel like there's an organization that's trying. Like they're working hard. They're spending. Like, I mean, if they were Calgary, who are going to miss the playoffs for the first time
in forever.
In like 30 years or whatever. In fact, for the first time ever, both Alberta teams aren't going to make it. That's incredible in itself. But into the Stampeders sort of way of looking at it, as opposed to the Elks or Eskimos, whatever you prefer, the Ticats have spent money. They're willing to spend to the cap. They're willing to go out and get big-name players. The Levi Mitchell experiment, which, obviously because of injury, didn't work last year.
Doesn't that make it worse?
He's had a great season.
I know. Doesn't that make it worse? Like, it would be explainable if you had the David McDonald, George Grant era where there was no money and you have to just try and get by and you have a 1-17 season. You go, yeah, but it's because we couldn't afford anything. We got nobody in the front office. We can't afford players. You can afford front office. You can afford scouts. You can afford big name players, and you still fail. That's worse than if you were just in some sort of difficult financial situation. So, no, this is a ludicrous situation this team is now facing, that they are now going into their second quarter century without a championship. That, who knows, maybe next year. Now, I know a lot of people are saying, well, look, they just finished a run of 4 in a row that they won before playing Winnipeg. So, the second half of the year, they're turning it on. So it's going to be a great start to next year. Go back the last 3 seasons. They finished strong with winning streaks, 4 games, 5 games, 4 out of 5, 5 out of 6, whatever it was. And each year they follow that up by starting 0-3, 0-4, 0-5. There is no, here anyway, there's no seeming connection from one year to the next. So that you can say, yeah, we've had a much better second half. The Ticats, they got Chris Jones, things are turning a corner. Maybe, but in recent history, there is no correlation between the strong end of one year and a strong start to the next. We'll see if next year that changes, but it hasn't so far.
Well, and this week, Scott Milanovich talked about that now in his prior life with other teams, that he has kind of talked about this team aren't going to stop in the next 2 games.
Yeah, momentum.
They're not going to be playing, experimenting with players. They're starting their starters, and they're going out to win these games and finish the season at would be 8-10. Mm-hmm. And that momentum can build into the next year. But to your point there, it just hasn't seemed to work now. Not under his regime, but maybe under past regimes, that has not been the case. And I think of early parts of this season, Scott, where, quite honestly, they gave away games.
They did.
Right? I mean, the Saskatchewan
on Friday,
game,
they dropped a pass and they would have won that game.
You're right. I think of the Saskatchewan game and the Tim White issues that we saw at the end of the game there. I mean, I don't know how we can ever forget this. It was a game that really could have set up the season to go in a different direction.
Of course it could. But what's that old line about? If ifs and buts were candies and nuts, we'd all have a Merry Christmas. I mean, if this had happened, if that had happened, it doesn't. That's why you play sports, and it doesn't. And year after year, for the past 3 or 4, year after year, those ifs and buts have not gone the Ticats' way. They start with a terrible start to the season and dig themselves a hole. And yeah, you make the playoffs more often than not. The Ticats have made the playoffs. They can point to that. If they really want to point to that and say, oh, but all right, we haven't won a championship, but we make the playoffs every year. I had to look it up because I couldn't remember the numbers. Over the past decade, prior to this year, the last place team in the East has averaged 3.7 wins. If you can't make the playoffs when the team below you has fewer than 4 wins, that's nothing to hang your hat on. Making the playoffs in the East, this year the East is pretty good.
The East is good.
But for so many years, there was always at least one terrible team in the East that you could always bank on. We just got to be better than them, and better than the 4th place team in the West. And it's not. I don't think any Ticat marketing person that wants to put out a ad campaign saying, yeah, we made the playoffs most years. I think I honestly believe fans are like, you know what? That's great. That's great. We've made the playoffs. Let's win a Grey Cup. Since the Ticats won in these 25 years, since the Ticats won their last Grey Cup in '99, every single team in the league has won it at least twice. Ottawa once, but they've only been in the league for 10 years. They've only been in for part of that time. Calgary, Toronto, and I think Montreal, I think there was those 3, have won 4 times since Hamilton has been able to put it together once. And so when you talk about, they have money and they can buy players and they have staffs and everything, that's more of an indictment to me than it is some positive thing. You have the capability, the financial backing. Bob Young is a strong, committed owner. I don't really blame Bob Young. People can blame Bob Young. I don't blame Bob Young. Bob Young has given this organization what it needs to perform, and it's gone not all under him, 20 seasons under him, but it's gone 25 years without winning a Grey Cup. And I go back to the fact it's a 9-team league. We're almost at the point where statistically you should be looking for your third, and they're not having one.
I'll be back when the season's over because there's so much to dissect. There really is. And I don't know where this team goes from here on several different levels. But let's see what happens over the next couple of games to see if they can finish up strong. Keeping with the CFL, 12-3-1 are the Montreal Alouettes. 10-7 are the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. They do lead their respective divisions in the East and the West. Yet, right now, I don't know if those are the teams to beat in the CFL. Do you think the same way?
I'm not a betting man. I've said that, I think, every time we've done this podcast. But if I was right now, I think I'd be putting my money on Winnipeg. Just both the teams. We saw early in the season, because we see Hamilton, of course, more closely, how dominant Montreal's defense can be. I mean, Montreal's defense, when it's really going, can be outstanding. But we've now seen over the last, 8 weeks, 9 weeks, that Winnipeg is back to that. And their defense is great when it's going well. I think Winnipeg now has a little more offense. I think Caleros is a little bit better than what Montreal offers, whoever's going to play for Montreal. Brady Oliveira, I think, is probably the odds-on favorite to be MOP this year, the running back for Winnipeg. So if you say the defenses are a wash, I give the slight edge to Winnipeg. And Toronto, Chad Kelly has not been great since coming back from his suspension, but that potential is always there. I mean, he's a defending MOP for a reason. Toronto, we saw Montreal catch fire and win the Grey Cup last year. Could Toronto do that this year? I wouldn't rule that out. And out west, you've got those two quarterbacks in BC, neither which has been great in the second half of the year. But again,
Vernon Adams is going to start this week.
I know. And you say, okay, so it's a bit of a mishmash there. They can't quite figure out who should be going. Could one of those guys get red hot, though? Sure they could. But I would still, if I had to pick one, I would still say at this point, I would put Winnipeg at the top of the list.
Ring, ring. Oh, that's the fine folks in Regina right now, just giving us a call right now. The Rough Riders may be the hottest team in the league right now. With the Winnipeg now and that losing streak finally coming to an end last week. They went winless in 7, and now they've won 4 in a row.
Yep.
And theoretically, and it's a real possibility, they could win the West. They look real good, and they've beat all the top teams.
Yeah, no, you know what? They're just one of those teams that what you just described, though, is they have been so streaky that, you know what, if they are streaking, which very much sounds like 1970s sports, but if they are on the right streak into the playoffs, yeah, they could be really, really tough. But I just look at them and I think it's just as likely or just as possible that they could go ice cold again, and then you're done. Winnipeg to me had that really bad start, but then has found their game and been consistent and been consistently good. And to me, there's just less questions about what kind of performance you're going to get from the Bombers.
Yeah, Trevor Harris to me is one of those guys at this time of the year, as long as he's healthy, I feel like as long as he's the quarterback of this team, and Saskatchewan have the best defense in the league, I think, overall, statistically, they are rough, they are tough, they have arguably a guy that could win MOP in Milligan, and I know it's tough to give it to defensive players, especially a cornerback, but he's putting up outstanding numbers on special teams and defense. But
so you've talked about 5 of the teams that are in the playoffs. Yeah. BC, Saskatchewan, Winnipeg, Toronto, Montreal, which you know what that means. The team that is going to win the Grey Cup this year, they're going to get crazy hot, and all of a sudden roll is Ottawa. There you go. Make a note of that it'll the unlikeliest win of all time, that no one talks about Ottawa because they've been really kind of poor the second half of the year after a good start. Again, I don't anticipate this, but Ottawa could be this year's Montreal. Montreal was very mediocre.
See it.
They were. I don't either.
I love Masoli, but I just don't see. I don't
either. But you know what? Nobody would have picked Montreal last year to do what they did. They just all of a sudden the switch went and they just went crazy. And so I'm being entirely facetious when I say that it could be Ottawa, but that is, again, it's a cliche, but that's the beauty of sports, that all of a sudden something happens and that one team gets rolling and never know. But I again, if I was forced into betting, it would not be putting money down on Ottawa.
It is the beauty of the CFL in so many ways. Toronto Maple Leafs are off to a 3-win and 1-loss start to the season. Straight up, Scott, because I know you love the team. Is this the same old, or do you kind of see a difference with this reshaped roster and a new head coach, Craig Berube, and his new approach to leading this club?
They do look different, don't you think? They do look different, and I think that for me, you can point to Craig Berube, and maybe that's the reason. And I'm hesitant to say too much about how different things are because it is 4 games, and Calgary is, I think, still leading the league, and I certainly don't expect Calgary to be in first place when this thing comes to an end. So, and I don't expect Colorado to be struggling or Nashville to be struggling. So, who knows? But to me, the biggest difference right now for the Leafs is, for the first time in several years, if you're watching this game, I don't think that you are waiting for the terrible goal to go in on this team. The goaltending, and again, it's 4 games, but the goaltending with Hildebeest and Stolarz, it's looked great. You got 2 giants in there.
They're huge.
They've got huge, and you still got Joseph Woll, who knows what that's going to be all about. But the goaltending right now looks as, I won't say as good, I won't say as great, but as stable and reliable, and like you're not flinching every time if you're a Leaf fan that, that one's going to squeeze under a glove or squeeze it. It just looks solid. And anyone who's ever played or coached hockey, and I mean, I'm talking, I've coached kids hockey, but even with that, and I'm not comparing it, but even with that, you realize if you have a goalie in there that all the guys trust, that he's going to make a save for you, can play differently. You can play differently. You can take a few more chances because you don't have to always be coming back because you're scared to death. But at the same time, if you're defensively responsible, you also know that if you've got that solid guy, man, we're gonna really lock things down here. And that's the difference I've seen so far with the Leafs. I mean, Matthews isn't scoring like last year yet. None of them are. They just look like they are way, way harder to score on right now.
Yeah, they look tougher. I know we hear the common term is heavy. They're a heavy team to play against and a hard team to play against. And I'll tell you, the acquisition, and I think it's been somewhat underrated, and I think we'll really see the value, I think, in the playoffs, is the likes of an Oliver Ekman-Larsson and adding Chris Tanev to the likes of Morgan Rielly. It's always just been Morgan Rielly trying to contribute offensively and be defensively responsible. And now he can just do his thing. That, to me, is a huge difference. You're right, stability and goal. I mean, just look at the goal that Samsonov gave up that ended their season last year. That dump in off the boards, and you're right. It was. I mean, for many that say, it was a tricky bounce, but he stood there. He should have went out and you just didn't know what you were getting with the guy, right? And he was a great story because he battled back from the personal problems. Joe Woll has proven to be completely unreliable when it comes to his health. When he's playing, he's the number 1 goaltender in my opinion.
Is he?
But
I think that I wonder if Stolarz is now kind of.
You could be right.
The longer Woll is out, the more that he plays, that Stolarz plays well. I'm not. I mean, the only thing we don't know is that I think, and I don't have the number in front of me, but I think his career high in games played in a season is 26.
Yeah, it's under 30.
And so this is one of those things that I think you start reassessing at the midpoint of the season when he's already getting towards that number, and you see, is this a guy who's going to wear down? But that's one of the nice things, if you're a Leaf fan, that's one of the nice things that, I mean, Hildeby looked good. Maybe not great, didn't have to be, but he looked solid, he looked good, he looked confident. If Woll comes in and plays well, you can spread this out a little bit and not have a guy be exhausted, and you can find someone by the time the playoffs roll around. One of the things that I just find so interesting about this is, for so many years, it's been a lot of talk about this offense and, the fans need excitement. I think that you're seeing right now, Toronto Maple Leaf fans are at the point, maybe like Ticats fans, like we just talked about. They've been, if Ticats going 25 years is a failure, or whatever the Leafs are up to now, 57 years, I think the Leafs I think Leaf fans at this point would say, I don't care if we score 1 goal a game and win 1-0 every game, and there's only 4 total shots on net, and the entire game is played between the blue lines. I don't care. Just win. Just win. Now, that said, I'm not sure who the Leaf fans are who are even watching on opening night. Did you see the opening? At one point, I think it was the start of the second period, maybe, there was almost no fans that you could see in the Platinums because they've got that new rebuilt arena, the whatever, the concessions, the amenities for the rich folks. And it's almost embarrassing at some point, but there are Leaf fans out there. There's an awful lot of real Leaf fans out there, and they don't care what the score is. I honestly believe they don't care if Austin Matthews scores 20 goals. Just win.
That's not going to happen.
No, I know, but they'd be fine. They'd be fine. If Austin Matthews scores 20 goals and they win, they would be fine. They don't need the excitement. They need to finally have some success.
It's funny you bring about the sort of atmosphere issue. I mean, once again, and I guess he's getting old and grumpy, and I love the guy. Joe Bowen tweets about it once again. Yeah, about the lack of atmosphere. I mean, especially for a team that may be as good as they are this year. But again, it's early. It's really early. If we are to assume that the New York Yankees win the American League, and we're talking baseball now, and advance to the World Series, which NL possible winner makes for a better fall classic matchup? Would it be the New York Mets in the Subway Series, and the teams are back to back and within a subway of each other? I mean, they'll build that up, or Shohei Ohtani and the LA Dodgers.
I believe wholeheartedly that Major League Baseball would want the latter. They would want Shohei in that, and they would want the Dodgers, and then because you already got the New York audience, so you're going to get, I mean, that you know who they want. There is something, neither team is particularly likable in the sense that they spend just bucket loads of money. There's no soft spot for either of these teams among the general public. There's no Kansas City or there's no Tampa Bay or someone that's in there that you say, oh man, they've overcome the adversity of having a $200 million less salary.
That's a small market story.
Yeah. We like those though most of the time. I don't know. I mean, the Dodgers just in the off season were such, and I. almost like spending bullies where they just outspent everybody and anybody. They got everybody they wanted, and anybody that, they're basically the West Coast Yankees. I mean, this really would be the Yankees against the West Yankees. For that reason, I kind of think it would be fun to not see the Dodgers win, to not see the Dodgers get there, just because even though the Mets also spend their brains out, it becomes too predictable. If the Dodgers get to the World Series against the Yankees, it's just, even though it doesn't happen every year, it just seems like it's sort of what was supposed to happen based on salary. I don't know. It's hard to find it's hard to find a soft spot for either of these teams. They're both the Goliath. There's no David in this one.
There's no doubt about that. Yeah, they're the big wigs. They are the most established franchises worldwide, recognized in the New York Yankees symbol, and of course the Dodgers symbol as well too. I mean, people are wearing hats and jerseys all over the world of those two teams, and not so much the Mets. It's interesting. I have family in New York, and I've always learned this from them, is that to the real New York sports fans, the Jets will always be bigger than the Giants. Yet the Giants have been tremendously, I mean, not right now, but tremendously way more successful. Won multiple Super Bowls. The Jets have the one, Joe Willie.
Yeah.
Right? In 69. And that's what they hang on to. It's the same thing for the Mets and the Yankees. The Yankees are tremendously popular in New York. But for the sweetheart baseball fan, it's the Mets. And again, 69, the Magic, the Miracle Mets. Tom Seaver, we can go on and on with those teams. And then, of course, they had the little run in the 80s there with Strawberry and those guys.
Dykstra, Hernandez, all those guys, yeah.
Carter. Like, again, and you saw the swell of attention that these teams get. I love the New York thing. I really do.
The worst case scenario, though, if you're just an average fan, the worst case scenario is Mets, Yankees, and the Yankees win. Because then it's like, you know what, if the Mets get in, you want the Mets to beat the Yankees just for the story. I don't have a dog in either fight. I mean, I'm not a fan of any, I'm not a diehard fan of any of the teams. But if it's going to be the Mets and the Yankees, I think if you're not a Yankee fan, you want the Mets to win just because, again, the Yankees are kind of supposed to win. They have all the championships. You want the team to upend it, I think, because it's just, otherwise it's like, all right, well, here we go again. It's just,
And
Mets
the
lose.
Mets, they've got Grimace on their side.
Yeah, what? I saw that. Okay, so I've obviously not been that tuned in. When did Grimace end up as I mean, I know we got Youppi that became a Canadians thing from the Expos, but when did Grimace become a Mets guy?
So midway through the season, the team were about 10 games under 500. I had to do my studies on this and I actually did something on the 6 o'clock news about it because it's so interesting to me. They're about 10 games under 500 midway through the season, and for whatever reason, the promotions department went to McDonald's and said, "We want Grimace."
Not the Hamburglar?
Do you know what Grimace is? A taste bud. That is what Grimace is. He is a
I thought he was
taste
an
bud
eggplant
on our tongue. That is what he is. Why he's purple, I don't know.
Yep. Burned from too much. The hamburger was really hot when he bit into it. It's burnt.
So they had Grimace come out and throw the first pitch. This ceremonial first pitch. And then he went in there, and the Mets went on a 7-game winning streak. And then they lost it, and then they went another 7-game win streak. And then guys on the team started wearing purple cleats. And then they kept asking him to come back. And then he started taking the subway to games where fans were on the subway, obviously, and there was just a ruckus that kept going on, and he kept showing up to games, and they kept winning. And then they put on this, I think they went 60 and 30 down the stretch to make the postseason.
All right, so this is just another example of Ross Atkins doing a horrible job as Blue Jays general manager. How did he not get Mayor McCheese to be the Blue Jays? If this is all it takes is to get a McDonald's character, then he absolutely should have done that. I'll say this for the Mets. And again, I don't follow them all that closely. I know Jerry Seinfeld's a big fan. That's about the as much as I follow them. They have had, so the Grimace thing is pretty good, and they had that guy, what's his name, the trumpeter, who used to his song was played when the closer would come out, and then they brought him out to the park.
Diaz comes out, yes.
And I love that. I actually loved that when they brought him there to do it live, which I thought was great, because in baseball, you could go to be the intro guy for a closer, and you could go on a 5-game losing streak and never get to play. Or you could warm up your trumpet, you warm up your mouthpiece, warm up your lips, and then all of a sudden the team scores 6 in the 8th inning and the guy doesn't get to come in. So I love that he was there. I love they did that. They've had some good, I love the apple.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot of stuff the Mets do really well. They just are so always completely overshadowed by the Yankees, except for those very, very rare years when the Mets have been really good and the Yankees have been bad. Problem is, it doesn't happen all that often. There's been a few Subway Series, and there's been times when the Mets have been bad, but the Yankees have also been bad. It's just doesn't happen often that the Mets are great and the Yankees aren't.
Yeah, I mean, there's Yankee Stadium and then there's Citi Field. Or back in the day, Shea Stadium, right, which I went to and was just old, right? So, hey, let's stick with baseball for a second here. Dodgers left fielder Teoscar Hernandez. He's having
one of the Dodgers you can root for.
Oh, yes, for sure. He's so fun. He's having himself an amazing postseason and had an outstanding regular season. Signed a 1-year deal, $23 million, and bet on himself, and it's working out. In a recent press conference, he chatted with Sportsnet's Hazel May, and then he started to speak glowingly about his Toronto experience. His family love it, his kids love it, his wife love it. So people were furious. The more you see this kind of stuff, the more furious you get with the Blue Jays for letting him go. Guy won a Silver Slugger Award. If you were Ross Atkins, would you go out and pay to get this guy?
So if I recall a recent comment, maybe from his end of season thing, whatever, did Ross Atkins not have a comment of something along the line that power hitting is overrated, or power is like, there was something that I just don't see the likelihood that this Blue Jays brass is going to spend 25 or 26 million when you've already got Springer on for a big deal still, and you've got Vladdy Guerrero coming up and Bo Bichette coming up that you're going to have to sign big deals to. I don't see them being inclined to do that. And should they? I don't think they should have let him go. I mean, the story was, and I don't know that I give much credence to it, the story was that he was too fun. They were trying to make things a little more serious in the club. I don't know if that was really the thing or
Well, they
not.
took away the home run jacket.
I know, but you can take away the home run jacket and not take away Teoscar entirely. You know, but so I don't know if that was the reason for him being gone. But you know, he was a guy who was good in Toronto. He's been really good in Los Angeles. You just get the impression from this Blue Jays brass that there's going to be a few guys that are going to make a lot of money. And again, Guerrero, probably Bichette, though. I mean, assuming they both sign. Springer's got a big deal. And they're going to go and look for power numbers and runs in garage sales and bargain basement bins.
They can't do that again.
But who did they do this year? They got, what's his name from the Dodgers, the third baseman that they ended up trading.
Isaiah Kiner-Falefa.
Well, no, him, but they also the redheaded guy.
Turner.
Thank you, Turner. And I mean, this is what they tend to do. They'll have a few guys. They'll put a lot of. If past recent history follows again, the Jays offseason will probably look like this. They will announce, or it'll leak out, that they've got their sights set on some big name guy. So Springer they landed. But last year it was Shohei, which didn't. There'll be something that they're going after, big game hunting with this big, name, big expensive guy who will choose not to come to the Blue Jays, and then they will fill the spots and try and say, well, we'll improve internally, and we'll sign some 175-pound slap-hitting third-string shortstop from the Dominican to fill in for infield. I mean, and it will not solve the problems. Now, I'm not suggesting that Teoscar Hernandez turns the Jays from the team they were this year into a contender. But, I just mentioned Jerry Seinfeld as a Mets fan. And with Ross Atkins and Mark Shapiro, I always think of that episode of Seinfeld where George decides that everything he does is wrong. So you got to go against every inclination you have. Instead of salmon on white, I'm having tuna on rye. Ross Atkins needs to be George Costanza, and every time he has a thought that involves baseball, do the exact opposite, because everything he's done has led the team from a team that they inherited from Alex Anthopoulos that was a playoff team to one of the worst teams in baseball this year. That's your inclinations taking you in the wrong direction. So go with different inclinations.
But God, we could go. I don't want to go too deep into this, but now you're triggering things for me. In that recent press conference where Atkins and Shapiro spoke to the media, and obviously they're speaking to the Blue Jay fans as well too. They're proud of what they've done. They have said that yes, this was an alternate universe. They said that this has been a tremendous disappointment last year that went by. But that I use the words that Mr. Shapiro said about Mr. Atkins is that he's happy with what Ross has done because they have been playing meaningful baseball games in September. Now that meant 2 years at the playoffs, if I remember correctly, or 3 years in the playoffs and no wins.
Like so many teams get into, even if it's just for a one game, but so many teams get into Major League Baseball playoffs now. They've made it so that almost every team, you have to be so putrid not to have meaningful games in September, that almost every team can argue we are playing meaningful games in September. But it doesn't mean squat because they don't get into the playoffs. And if they do get in the playoffs, they don't win a single game in the playoffs. Right? You can. This is like accountants in Hollywood movies where you can make the numbers say whatever you want them to say. You as a baseball executive can say, oh, we found there's 1 trillion numbers in baseball. You can pick and choose and find certain things that you like and you point to and say, oh, we did this really well, or oh, we were improved here, or I don't care if you're playing meaningful games in September. If you lose those games, and then if you somehow squeak in, if you can't do anything in the playoffs, these are two executives who, quite frankly, have absolutely nothing to stand on at this point. Every word they say is vapid and empty because they have done nothing. They have done nothing except inherit a really good team and turn it into a really bad team. So the idea of Teoscar Hernandez, love to see him back. It's only money. It's not my money. I don't care. Rogers clearly has gazillions of dollars. They just bought the Leafs, and it's not like they're short on money. This is pocket change for them, whatever the Blue Jays salary is. I'd love to see him back. I'd love to see them go out and get 3 or 4 guys that would improve their lineup. But I have almost zero faith that even if they did that Atkins and Shapiro would choose the right guys. And so, I just don't see the Blue Jays winning anything significant or meaningful until there's a change at the top. And even if somehow they slip into the playoffs next year, they improve a little bit, which they almost have to, and they win a game or two, maybe they even win a round in the playoffs. My answer to that is, a broken clock is right twice a day, as the old cliche goes. You're going to stumble into something every once in a while against all odds that works in your favor. But does that mean that they have done a great job as the leaders of this team? Teoscar Hernandez is a perfect example of how that's not the case. They lost that guy. He's a key contributor on a World Series contending team, and they didn't think there was a place for him within the Blue Jays organization. What does that tell you?
Even with Seattle as well, too.
Yep.
Coming off back-to-back losses, and some of them, the two, maybe even humbling if you want to affix it to
Sure.
it. The Ravens and Texans. Buffalo Bills beat their division rival New York Jets on Monday night, and then traded for receiver Amari Cooper. The Bills are favorites, or at least amongst the favorites now, to win the AFC and get to the Super Bowl.
Maybe. If you're a Bills fan, that Ravens game scared you because of what Derrick Henry did and what they were able to do on the ground. Now, to be fair, if I recall correctly, during that game, the camera kept panning over to the sideline, and there were 3 Pro Bowl defensive players standing on the sideline in street clothes because they were injured. And I think that when Matt Milano, assuming he can get back and get healthy, I think he's such a key part of this defense that he is an impactful, game-changing kind of guy for them.
Especially against the run.
Yeah. So there's that. I think the Kansas City Chiefs right now are the most fraudulent 5-0 team in the history of football. They have been mediocre at best, and their quarterbacking has been not great, and they're 5-0, so you got to give them credit for being 5-0, but I don't think that they are a great team right now. They can be. They've shown that they can work themselves into greatness. At this point, though, I think that's a lucky 5-0. The Ravens are scary. And then who else in the AFC? The Bengals were supposed to be that next team. They're not.
Anymore.
You go through the list. Some of the Dolphins were supposed to.
Not anymore.
Not anymore. The Jets were supposed to be. Now they may turn into something with Devontae Adams coming in there. So, are the Bills in the mix? Yeah, I would say the Bills are in the top 3 or 4, and I would suggest that if those defensive players come back and that defense gets going again like it has in the past, despite what has happened in recent years, I think the Bills can beat the Chiefs. I mean, I really do believe the Chiefs are very beatable this year right now. Again, who knows? They may see what has happened with these receivers getting traded and go out and make a move of their own and upgrade the offense, whatever. But yeah, the Bills would be in my top 3 right now in the AFC. Here's my concern if you're a Bills fan. And the funny thing is, a little behind the scenes stuff. During a recent Bills game, Bubba and I were texting about this back and forth because I really believe that the Bills' biggest hurdle to overcome when it gets into a big game is Sean McDermott. The guy is a great defensive coach, but has shown repeatedly in recent years that when big games get down to the final few minutes or final few seconds, whatever it is he does doesn't work. You got the 13 seconds. You've got the Texas fiasco where they decided to pass 3 times. You had this one against the Jets where it's just the guy, for whatever reason, has shown a propensity for turning from a pretty good coach to a terrible coach in the last minute of close, important games. And until he changes some stuff, I mean, that halftime where the Bills rushed 2 against Rodgers and allowed him to throw that Hail Mary.
Never happened.
They were getting all kinds of pressure on Rodgers. They were getting all kinds of pressure on him. And so even if you drop everybody back and rush 4 just to prevent it, if you get anywhere close to him, the receivers don't have time to get down into the end zone. He goes into this, McDermott I'm talking about, goes into this ultra uber conservative coaching style when the game is right there. And I really, to this day, I believe the Bills would have had a Super Bowl whatever year it was. What year was the 13-second game against Kansas City?
I guess that's
6 years ago?
Yeah,
something like that?
3 seasons ago, yeah.
That 13 seconds might have been the worst coaching performance
It's horrible.
ever. You had a championship, a line to a path to a championship in your grasp, and they had 13 seconds to work, and somehow you allowed them to go down and score.
It's horrible.
And so until McDermott decides, you know what we've been doing or something we're doing has worked for 59 minutes and 30 seconds or 29 minutes and 30 seconds, half, whatever. We're going to just stay with it and trust that the one time it doesn't work is here. I think they're always going to have that to overcome.
You bring up, I mean, this is being talked about in Buffalo. This isn't just something that you're saying. Like, this is something that's actually out there right now, that McDermott is the guy that, for some reason, you're right, defensive mind. He's just done a wonderful thing since he's been in Buffalo. He's a guy that has turned around a team. People are wondering if he's the kind of guy he's a Mr. Fix-It guy, but you need a guy to get your team over the top. And he may not be the guy. You look at those losses this year, and yeah, I fixed the word humbling to them because, the way they kind of lost in some ways was humbling. At the end of the day, when you played Baltimore, you came back in that game. You came and started to make... It was a one-score. It could have been a one-score game, but then they started to get some. That
trick plays, yeah.
The flea flicker, and you almost got your quarterback killed. At least his back, and then there was a turnover, and the game was never the same. The Houston game again, fall behind, battle back. You should have pushed that game to overtime, and I don't know what they were thinking from inside their own 5-yard line, and that is the head coach's responsibility, which he took responsibility.
Sure he did, and you know what? He'll come out, and every time he said, this is a learning moment, and we're going to learn from the blah, blah, blah. Coaches say this all the time. Sean McDermott, to me, is one of the really good coaches in the league from minute 1 to minute 29 and from minute 30 to minute 59. But that last minute of halves has been so problematic for him to be able to close things out that I just and those are key moments. You can go back, you can probably find 4, 5, 6, maybe more games that in those really pressure times, wrong decisions have been made that have blown up in their face. Or maybe you don't even say wrong decisions that have turned out to be wrong, but inclinations that ways he plays for most of the game suddenly moves away from that when it gets really pressure packed, as opposed to seemingly having the conviction that what he's been doing has been good. Let's stick with it. And you have to believe that there is a certain point at which you've had enough of these that the guy is going to say, all right, next time I'm not going to do that. Next time, I'm just going to stick with it and go down with the ship. If we go down, we go down. If we rush 4 guys at the end of the half and Aaron Rodgers still dances around and finds a guy in the end zone and throws a Hail Mary, we'll live with that. But when we've been doing something that's been successful all along, it makes no sense to suddenly get away from that.
Just if we can have a look at the Bills' schedule, like this is the one thing here. We'll end on this. The Bills' schedule to me is very favorable, and you talk about that.
It's been
November.
Really tough, but it's suddenly now going in their direction.
It looks really appealing. Look, I mean, the Titans. I mean, sorry, they have to win this week. I think you can go to Seattle. I don't think that team's very good. The Dolphins could be Tua's return, but he's coming to Buffalo. Colts. I don't know. Can they beat Joe Flacco? I think so. The November 17th game, the Chiefs coming to Buffalo. You and I may be there for that. Boy, that's going to be real interesting. The Niners, they got bye week, and then
Buffalo,
the Niners.
Let me jump in for the Chiefs sector. The Bills have had the regular season success against the Chiefs. It's been the playoffs.
You're right, they have.
That they've had trouble with. And so,
you're totally
and
right.
again, Mahomes is just not Mahomes right now. He may be by November 17, but that's a winnable game. The Niners, man, they're not the team that you thought they were at the start of the year. Again, could be 6 weeks from now. And then the rest of it, Rams, Lions are great.
Lions will be tough. Going to Detroit will be tough. And then you end the season with your own division. Patriots, I think that and the Jets got to come to Buffalo, even with Devontae Adams. I don't know. I think this sets up real good for Buffalo right now. I don't think they're going to win them all, but they're going to win the majority of them, and I think they should win the AFC East.
They got through what was the toughest part of their schedule at 4-2. I mean, when you have Baltimore and you have Texas and you have
the Jets in New York was supposed to be tough.
It was tough. It was. I mean, the one thing the Bills may want to do before they get to all of that happening is find a kicker, but that's a different discussion. I'm pretty sure. I don't want to get into this whole thing. And Bass has been okay over the years, but that was it. Field goal or an extra point? It was a field goal.
I'm still trying to figure out what happened.
If you didn't see it, imagine Bubba or I taking a 40-yard field goal and how that might look. And it was worse. It was bizarre. It was a bizarre.
Snap was good. Hold was good.
Seemed to be.
It wasn't. The distance wasn't so far where you kind of have to overpower it.
Put it this way,
horrendous.
A kick is a bad kick. You know that big net that they raise behind the thing to stop it? If you miss the net with a field goal or extra point, your kick is a little awry. And it missed it. There was some guy in the crowd who probably almost got killed because he wasn't expecting he's holding his beer and a popcorn. And suddenly,
guy in the corners.
Yeah, he's talking to his wife or texting or something, and all of a sudden a football's coming at him at 100 miles an hour. Yeah, it's they may want to do that, but anyway.
Minnesota Lynx franchise record crowd. We're talking WNBA of 19,521 back to Target Center for last night's WNBA Finals Game 3. What a thriller it was. That was won 80-77 by the New York Liberty. Now, I don't know if we can, obviously the WNBA can be the basis of this, but I'm taking a look at what's going on right now. The Northern Super League that's going to be starting out real soon. An expanded season in the PWHL. Of course, it's Spectator moving to Rico and
Isn't
not
that a James Bond villain.
What's going on with female sports? I mean, is the future of sports in the hands of females going forward, Scott?
Well, so first of all, Minnesota Lynx, the one thing they're missing is former first-round draft pick from Hamilton, Shota Thorburn.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, who was drafted by the Lynx and played there for a bit. I'm going to say no to your broad question, is the future of it female, because and that's not to say that it's not going to be a thing. I'm not suggesting that female sports is going away. I see no female sports league right now that is going to challenge the NFL or challenge the NBA or the NHL or whatever, or Major League Baseball. I don't. So in that way, no. But can it continue to grow? Yeah, of course it can continue to grow. The one thing that I think has been really strange to me and to many, 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 many other people this year, you saw maybe people saw the numbers. Caitlin Clark, when she was in the playoffs, their games were drawing on TV about 2.5 million people. As soon as she goes out, the numbers went down to 900,000 in the States. It's unquestionable that you have someone in women's sports who is I would argue, the biggest star in female sports right now. I don't know. Is there someone I'm missing, individual sport or team, that's bigger than Caitlin Clark?
No one has shown up in her first year.
No one has had the impact.
No one.
Numbers, attendance, viewership, interest, even casual
SNL skits.
Yeah, even casual sports fans who never watched women's sports knew of Caitlin Clark and maybe would tune in to see what was going on or would talk about Caitlin Clark. And yet, for whatever reason, so many people who cover the WNBA, who were involved in the WNBA, former players, spent so much of the season dumping on her, it seemed, and it was a baffling scenario. You've got this gold mine on your hands, and there was real reluctance by, it seemed, so many people around that league to really...
I don't know if they were dumping on her, Scott. I think
Cheryl
that's unfair.
Swoops?
I don't think they were. I think that's unfair. I think that what they were trying to say is that there have been many people before and after Caitlin Clark that are the strength of the league, and that, you know, and this
that
is
drew
where
nobody.
Huh?
That drew nobody. Crowds were down.
No, but I think it was growing. I think it was growing. I mean, and Sabrina Ionescu and Brianna Stewart. I think they're important parts of these teams as well, of this league as well too. I think they were. Maybe there's jealousy. Maybe. Yeah, they didn't like the attention that it was, because it was all Caitlin Clark. And I think all they were saying is that this league is made up of not just one amazing basketball player, it's made up of many basketball players that, that need and deserve the attention that she's getting.
And who cares? Because here's the point that I would say to any one of them who would make that argument. When Tiger Woods came onto the PGA Tour and he started winning everything, I have no doubt there were players that were really sour that Tiger Woods was getting all the attention, Tiger Woods was winning all the tournaments, Tiger Woods was getting all the endorsements. And what did he do for that? He drove golf to a level where every single one of them became more famous, certainly earned more money, and became household names. There's guys on the PGA Tour now who 25 years ago, 30 years ago, you would have never heard of, because golf was about the top like 10 or 12 guys. Now we know the names of everybody on tour, and I attribute a huge amount of that to Tiger Woods. Some to Phil Mickelson and those guys who came along, but it was Tiger Woods that did that. So if you're worried that Caitlin Clark is getting too much attention too early, to me, you're missing the point. You celebrate her because as people tune in to see Caitlin Clark, they will then see you if you're that good. See the team, see the game, and appreciate it peripherally. They will by osmosis begin to see what else is there. When the NBA in 1979, I guess the fall of 79, 80, had Larry Bird and Magic Johnson come in together, those guys saved the league, and the league celebrated the fact they were on TV. Every time they could put those guys on TV, they were on TV. McDonald's jumped on them and did commercials with the two of them and made them stars, and Coke and whatever else. And if you were a player in the league who said, oh, why is Magic and Bird getting all the attention? 5 years later, when TV revenues are through the roof, when buildings are being filled, when people are buying shoes that you're now wearing because those guys wore them, I don't think you were complaining. I think that the entire idea that Caitlin Clark was too much, too soon, got too much attention, was entirely missing the point. I don't know whether it's jealousy. Some people have said there was a racial thing to it. I don't know. I don't know what the reason was behind this, but it was a whiff. It was a giant whiff, and I'm hoping, to your point about women's sports in the WNBA, that in the off season, when these teams, when the broadcasters, when the executives, when the other players get a chance to catch their breath, that there is some kind of league-wide decision made. You know what? We didn't handle that as well as we didn't take advantage of that as well as we. Her not being on the Olympic team, for example, was just catastrophically stupid. Even if she was the 12th player and you say she's a rookie, she's not going to play much, you would have had way more viewership. They need to spend this offseason figuring out, how do we build Caitlin Clark up?
Is that fair to her?
What? Not.
I mean, from what you're kind of like, you're.
Was it fair to Tiger? Was it fair to Bird and Jordan, or Bird and Magic Johnson? Any of these guys, Gretzky? When you have someone who is uniquely special, you latch on to that, and everyone else will be dragged up with them. It's a mistake not to.
Interesting point.
And so, to women's sports, I think women's sports can grow magnificently in future years if they make smart decisions. If they make smart decisions. And if they knock down the people who are going to be their stars and tell you that Angel Reese, who, I'm sorry, great rebounder, but can't hit a layup most of the time, that she's the best player, which is what some people are arguing. People look at this and go, I'm sorry, this is parallel universe stuff. She's just not. She's fine. She's a good player. We'd be happy to have her on our team. but let's celebrate the exceptional and the things that draw eyeballs. That's what's going to grow women's sports.
Well, let's just hope that each one of these leagues find someone
Absolutely.
like that. And as we talk about Tiger Woods, and I think that's a great example there, that's a generational sort of thing. I mean, they only come around once every maybe decade, 2 decades, who knows. But as these sports grow, I think we're going to start to uncover different special athletes within their sport. And to your point there, maybe they need to be highlighted.
One last thing on that. What has the NBA, probably more than any other league, done, and the NFL too, to agree? Celebrity. Yes. Celebrity drives. LeBron James, great basketball player, but the reason that you know about him is because of basketball partially, but because they have made a point of making sure he gets camera time all the time. Celebrity works.
NBA does it better than anyone.
And the NFL would probably be second. Yeah. Baseball has been terrible at it, and the NHL has been not very good at it.
They're trying. I think they're trying.
They're trying, but I mean, the fact that like Mike Trout, anyway, we won't get into that. But the leagues, the NBA has done it. You need to use the celebrity that you have. And so whether it's in tennis, women's tennis, or women's hockey, or soccer with this new, whatever, find the people that the fans and the casual people are intrigued by and feed them all of that they can possibly take, and that seems to work.
According to a report from Brett McCormick of Sports Business Journal, the Oakview Group, who are renovating First Ontario Centre in downtown Hamilton, are in discussions to bring an American Hockey League franchise to the Steel City. Your thoughts on an AHL team, which has been here before? Will this work, Scott Radley?
All right. You know what? I've answered all your questions first. You tell me. I'm going to flip it back. I'll answer, but what do you think? Do you think it would work?
I think no. And let me tell you why. And I've been consistent on your old radio show, on other shows that I've been interviewed on. My thought is that the Bulldogs, when they were the junior, even though both teams won championships in Hamilton, the Bulldogs in the junior OHL variety won 2. Junior hockey, to me, I think you can look at on a worldwide basis and say to yourself that junior hockey is the best hockey in the world, with the most stars from the age of what we're seeing 15 to 20 years old. So it's the best junior hockey in the world. Now, you would look at the American Hockey League and say to yourself, well, it's the feeder system to the National Hockey League. Yet the attitudes are different. With the players, to me, in the OHL, they're looking to prove themselves. They're at a pre-draft situation. You're getting the very best out of them. When you're looking at the American Hockey League, you can't wait to get out of those teams because you're sharpening your skills, or your coach at the top level didn't see something out of you that you got to go work on. At the meantime, you can't wait to get out of that city and get out of that situation. Or you've got guys that just will never cut it in the National Hockey League, and that they're playing in the second best hockey league, men's hockey league in the world. And to me, that's a negative vibe that I just don't know the people in this city of Hamilton, because they're so close to Toronto and Buffalo and all the American sports, that we want the best. And I think the AHL does not represent the best.
I remember probably the year 2011, 2010, whatever it was, something in there. This is part of what you're just saying. The Bulldogs at that time had 2 great Montreal Canadiens prospects, or at least they were seen at the time as great prospects, Louis LeBlanc and Aaron Palushai. And I remember writing at the end of that year that each of them got called up and was sent down 7 times that season. So you have a team, when you have an AHL team, that you don't know day after day who you're going to watch. You don't know who's going to be there. And unlike the OHL, where at least you know those guys are here unless they go to the World Juniors, they're here for the season. It is a mishmash a lot of the time, and it's unclear what kind of team you get. You could start the year and win your 19 of your first 20 games and still be a terrible team by the end if all your guys get traded away as prospects or whatever else. So there's that. If somehow, and I'm not starting a rumor here, if somehow OVG can swing a deal and make the Toronto Marlies the team that plays out of here, the Leafs farm team, I think they could be successful-ish. Because I think people here in this city are largely Leaf fans, not all, but largely Leaf fans, and I think that would be the having the farm guys here, having the prospects here with the coverage that you get. I think there would be intrigue in that. However,
are you running to the rink to go see Matt Murray?
You might go to see. Well, see, I mean, it's a great question because when Carey Price, for example, came to Hamilton, or PK Subban, you had guys who were World Junior stars that they had proven themselves, and there was no real change in the attendance. So I don't know. I think that, remember, we've quoted Seinfeld a couple times in this show. May as well do it again. At one time, he talked about how sports is cheering for laundry. And that's what it would be. You're cheering for the shirt that's on, the sweater that's on them, rather than anything else. I'm trying to figure out they haven't said anything. I'm trying to figure out which team we're talking about. Is it an expansion team? I don't know.
We don't really know. The Marlies things make sense.
The Marlies thing, so I believe that MLSE just renegotiated or extended their lease at Coca-Cola Coliseum for another 10 years, which would suggest, it's not going to be the Marlies. However, the PWHL is playing out of Coca-Cola Coliseum, yes, and the WNBA is going to be starting in there. So maybe the Marlies now are expendable and they can come here. Now, the trick, and OVG, by the way, has said consistently, Tom Pastore, who's the Canadian president of OVG, has told me directly, we are getting a hockey team. It better be, and it's not going to be the OHL, or the OHL, they've said. So it better be the AHL, because heaven knows, I believe that if it was an ECHL team, that would be a catastrophic failure. It wouldn't work at all. Here's going to be the tricky part of a hockey team here. OVG has made it abundantly clear. They've said it over and over again. They had an event in Toronto a few weeks ago for Toronto business people who they're looking to move tickets to and everything. This is a concert-first venue. And the way that the new arena, newly rebuilt arena, is going to work is it's an escape valve. It's a relief valve for Toronto. Toronto only has one indoor 18,000 seat arena. There's a ton of musical acts traveling now. They can't all fit in there because Toronto has the Raptors and the Leafs. They also have to accommodate. And the Raptors and the Leafs play generally on Saturday and Sunday at home, very often. Which means if you're going to be the relief valve, you have to be available on Saturdays and Sundays for concerts here in Hamilton. If that's the case, it means that your hockey is going to have to be weeknights.
Not going to work.
That has been a huge challenge in this city. The Bulldogs, AHL and OHL, when they were here, tried to get almost all their games onto Friday and Saturday and Sunday because the Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday night games were tough. A Tuesday night game in January in the middle of the season, they would have been quicker to introduce the names of the people in the crowd rather than the players who were in the starting lineup.
1,500?
Sometimes.
Yeah.
So to me, the Leafs, the Marlies with the uniform, with the connection, is maybe the one organization that you say, all right, if we're going to tell people they have to come on a Tuesday night, maybe we can get some people out to come and see them. But I'm interested to see. I'm not going to say it won't work. I'm just interested to see how it's going to work if most of your weekends are unavailable because of concerts. That to me is going to be interesting, and you'd better have something that is really intriguing to local hockey fans.
Stay tuned.
Indeed.
That's your Sportsline podcast for the day. Scott Radley, thank you so much for joining us. Various topics there that we've brushed upon, which I think touch the sports interest and minds of so many people in our area right now, and I think that's a real interesting thing what's going on in Hamilton, because you're right. Mr. Lewicki had said that several times about top end, high end, Madonna, like high end people coming to Hamilton. But yeah, I don't think they're talking about them coming on a Wednesday night.
And you can't. Well, I know we got to go, but you can't say we're going to have a hockey game even at noon and a concert at 8, because it takes a day to set everything up on that stage. There's turnaround time
sound checks
for these things as well. So it's going to be really interesting to see how they're going to massage this to make all these things work and still be able to draw people. Again, I'm not going to say it can't, because I think, I give a lot of credit to OVG. They're a successful company. They figure these things out, but I'm really intrigued to see how they're going to make that work.
Mr. Lewicki, by my track record, hasn't really failed at a lot of things. So
no,
put his trust where we'll put our
Hamilton's... won a Stanley Cup with MLSE, but but he brought in Masai Ujiri and he won a championship. So I guess that
worked
counts
out
for
pretty
him, right?
well. Scott, thanks for your time, buddy.
Thank you.
All right, folks, as you just seen and heard, we love talking about sports on a variety of different topics and levels. And if you do know of an athlete, team, or event to promote the Sportsline podcast, you want to hear from you. Please hit the thumbs up, like, and subscribe button. And please be sure to check out all of our informative podcast on CHCH, like Trending Now and Newsmakers, which I know is hot off the press. For the outstanding people that make the Sportsline podcast possible, thank you so very much. And we'll see you next week.